I am.
Okay. Well, why don't we get started, Deb? We'll call the Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, April 21st, 2020 at 6 p.m. We'll open the call to order. We are not going to have a pledge of allegiance tonight. Nick, can you do a roll call?
Yes, I can do a roll call.
Okay.
So for those members of the Planning Commission, make sure you unmute yourself and just respond with a present. So Jim Kirkendall.
Here.
Dennis Gunner.
Here.
Connie Lapine.
Here.
Ann Peltier.
Present.
Ryan Penning, I believe, is not present. Mark Rahm.
Here.
And Steve Vogler.
Present.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. First thing on the agenda is the meeting, approval of the meeting from minutes from last meeting of March the 3rd. So if you'll take a look at those. And I'll ask if anyone wants to make any additions, corrections, or any comments. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March the 3rd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March the 3rd, 2020 commission meeting.
As approved, as presented.
As presented, yes.
And we have a motion and a first and a second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, they are approved. Thank you.
Who gave the second on that?
Andy.
Ann, thank you.
Okay, our first hearing tonight is on DC 2002. Public hearing. Tonight we're holding a legislative public hearing.
Mr. Chair, before we go into that, we were hoping to provide the public with a little bit of technical information on how this virtual hearing will go. So if you like, we can have staff read through a statement to explain to the folks on the phone how this is all going to work.
Yes, I would appreciate that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to ask if anybody from the Planning Commission is on the phone, because we're going to mute them if they're not.
Is there anyone from the Planning Commission before we begin on the phone?
Who is joined by phone only.
Who is joined by phone only and not by computer? Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and mute those that are on phone currently. They'll still be able to hear everything, and we'll unmute them when it's appropriate for public comment. The City of Millersburg is committed to strictly complying with Oregon Public Records and Meeting Law. During the unique situation posed by COVID-19, the city will make every attempt to provide the opportunity for public input during our virtual meetings. However, should we be unable to accommodate all or some public comment, we feel it's important to point out that Oregon Public Meeting Laws does not include the right to participate by public meeting and testimony or comment in all situations. Other statutes, rules, charter ordinances, bylaws outside the public meetings law may require governing bodies to hear public testimony or comment on certain matters. In the absence of such requirement, a governing body may conduct a meeting without any public participation. Governing bodies voluntarily may allow public participation at their meetings. In this case, so we do have some public hearings that we are required to, and we will allow the public meeting comment on those at the appropriate time. We ask the public's patience and understanding while we integrate new audio and video technology into our public meetings. This meeting will be recorded and may be posted for public viewing. This meeting will be conducted per our normal procedures. Public comment, again, will be taken during the required designated public comment periods. With regards to the public comments will be as normal, limited to 3 minutes each, and we will have a timer on once we start that, so you can see those of you that are on screen. Those that are only on phone and wish to comment, we can advise you when you've reached your 3-minute limit. Public comment will first be taken from those who are participating via computer. To speak during the public comment period, we will ask you to raise your hand by clicking on the participants icon on the toolbar and then clicking on the raise hand icon in the lower right of your screen. If you didn't see our information that we sent out, then it's posted on the website. For those of you that, if you're not seeing that, if you scroll over down towards the bottom of your screen there on the computer, you should see a bar light up and there's a participants bar there. If you click that participants bar, that should pull up. We're currently showing 19 participants on this, and you will see with the opportunity there to raise your hand. When you're called upon to speak, the meeting host will unmute you. We will ask that you state your name and street of residence. Once your comment period is finished, you will be muted again. Other comments will be taken in order in which the hands are raised. It'll actually, for us, place you in a numerical in order based on how the order in which the computer noticed your hand raised. Public comments will be taken from next after that. Public comments will be taken from those joining via phone. The meeting host will unmute phones and will ask those wishing to speak to state their name and city of residence and the number that you're on so we can associate it with you so we can do that. We will then, your name will be recorded, and once your name's been recorded, please mute your phone again. Once all the names have been recorded, individuals will be called upon to unmute themselves and speak in the order their names were recorded. Finally, all participants will be unmuted by the host to allow an opportunity for anyone who has not yet spoken to provide public comment and may have had difficulty under one of our first two options. Close of the public comment periods, all public participants will again be muted.
And if you are struggling to unmute yourself on the phone, we can unmute you on this end as well. So just give us a second and we'll work through that.
And if you are, you will notice there is a chat button there. We have that set to private, but if you're having a technical problem on the computer, you can chat. That will come into Janelle, who is the designated host on this meeting, and let her know that you are unable to unmute yourself, and we can assist you with that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you and Matt for the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, fellow commissioners. Everybody hear me okay? Jimmy, give me a thumbs up there if you're hearing me all right.
Thumbs up.
All right, sounds good. Matt Straight presenting tonight for staff through this most unique medium. The project before you tonight proposes to add an all-new section to the code for accessory dwelling units. The state requires any city with more than 2,500 population to allow accessory dwelling units by right on any property that allows a residential use. Right now, we have no accessory dwelling unit standards except the accessory structure standards, which we just approved about a month ago. Without standards, we can't control how accessory dwelling units blend with the city, and you may end up with something that looks more like this. So in order to have the right rules in place, we want to make sure that our accessory structures look more like this. A quick and important note, though, before we go into too much detail on the accessory structures. The state wants to see more accessory dwelling units because it helps address the affordability crisis that they say we have right now with residential. However, the city isn't allowed to add any kind of roadblocks to accessory dwelling units, meaning all the standards that we're going to be looking at tonight have to be clear and objective in order to meet the state's requirements. So for an example of that, we can't say that the owner has to live on the property because the state doesn't allow us to do that. We also can't add parking requirements for accessory dwelling units because the state specifically forbids us to do that as well. But those also act as examples of how we have to be clear and objective with all of our standards. So tonight we're going to run through this real quickly, line by line, so we can see what each of these standards that we're proposing tonight are going to be doing. Once again, this is an all-new section. Generally speaking, these standards have been hammered out with our Planning Commission already because we've been going through a process to update our entire code. And so the Planning Commission has seen a lot of these. This generally comes from the new code, but there are a few differences that we tweaked along the way. An accessory dwelling unit does not require any kind of land use permit the way we have this designed. It just goes straight to building permit, and that's written right into the code here as well. They do still, however, have to comply with these standards that we're about to walk through, even at the building permit stage. So when someone brings in a building permit request for an accessory dwelling unit, we're going to have our counter staff here go through this to make sure that these standards are met. So let's walk through the proposed standards real quickly, starting with the location. A detached accessory dwelling unit needs 6 feet between the main structure and the unit itself. This next one we have on the list here is primarily for Jake, for the section above, is that you're allowed to have accessory dwelling units placed within the front yard of your parcel, but only with a conditional use permit. Now that might sound strange at first, because why in the world would we want an accessory dwelling unit in front of a house? But there are still some parcels here in the city that are very large. And so it might make sense to be able to allow an accessory dwelling unit in front of that unit. You also have flag lots, which are completely surrounded and can't be seen from the public. So in that circumstance, an accessory dwelling unit in the front might be acceptable, but we're going to throw that before the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit, if that's so desired. This also clarifies that an accessory dwelling unit can be internal to a home, like a basement or an attic as well. Right now, we are only allowing 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot. This next standard that we have here, standard C, I call the Gunner Special, because this is something that Commissioner Gunner specifically asked for. We are not allowed to simply say that the accessory dwelling unit has to match the house. That's something that a lot of cities have tried to do and has been shot down by the Land Use Board of Appeals a number of different times, because they say that that's too subjective. It's not objective as the courts have required us to be. And so what we've done is we've added a more specific standard here that you can see that says the details must match the house. The roof, the colors must match the house, the roof pitch, and other design standards. But we've gotten more specific to try and remove the subjectivity from that in order to meet the state's requirements. Also, based on input from the Planning Commission, we've limited the size between accessory structures to be between 250 square feet and no more than 650 square feet. This is designed to minimize the impact from the state's mandate that parking not be allowed to be a requirement of ADUs. Generally speaking, a maximum square footage of 650 square feet will help assure that most of the ADUs are just studios or 1-bedroom apartments, and therefore would have a minimal impact on parking because the units are just intrinsically smaller. And you're going to see fewer people staying in them. An important part to note here is that this code provision we're talking about tonight doesn't include any escape hatches at all. There is no process at all for somebody who wants to go more than 650 square feet. You can't use a variance. There's no other tools in the code that would let you go larger than 650 square feet. The setbacks that we've specified here are identical to the setbacks for an accessory structure. Now, the version of the accessory structure ordinance that the Planning Commission saw just about a month ago was changed by our City Council, so they are different. And the City Council said that they have to have a 10-foot setback between the rear and the sides. So that sliding scale we had before didn't make it through the final version. Instead, there are 10-foot setbacks. But those same setbacks would apply here to an accessory dwelling unit. The maximum height that we've specified is 20 feet for a detached ADU. The internal and attached standard that you see here also is intended to be for an addition over a garage, like an apartment over a detached garage. Naturally, the accessory dwelling unit counts towards the lot coverage calculation. We've just made that overt by adding that in here. Metal shipping containers are not allowed to be used as ADUs. We've written that in here as well. You're also not allowed to have metal shipping containers as accessory structures. So really, we're just trying to close a loophole that may have existed before. All the structures have to be placed on foundations. This was our way of trying to assure that trailers couldn't be used as accessory dwelling units. Naturally, if they placed a trailer up on a foundation, that may then qualify, but they have to have a foundation of some variety. We clarify here that no off-street parking is required. We talked about this already. The state doesn't allow us to require any off-street parking, so this provision was primarily just inserted to make the state happy and make it crystal clear that we weren't requiring any kind of parking, and therefore we're consistent with the state's laws. This section here, section 2, simply adds a few additional standards for duplexes. Primarily, we're just trying to clarify the setbacks and how those work. Because a duplex, you would have the units attached. And so we want to be sure that if accessory dwelling units were added to any of those duplexes, you would still need a setback so that your accessory dwelling unit wasn't sitting right on the property line and thus could potentially impact a neighbor. So we've added a 10-foot structure separation for accessory dwelling units. Now, moving away from the new section that we've added, there's a few small changes we need to make in other sections of the code as well. Specifically, we're trying to add a definition for accessory dwelling unit in the definitions section of our existing code. And then we've also added accessory dwelling unit as a use to all of the residential zones as well. Now, in order to support the project tonight, as always, we have to make sure that the project meets the criteria from our code. So we're going to walk through those tonight real quickly as well. The text change tonight isn't allowed to impact any neighbors in any way. Now, the City Council changed that variable setback that we talked about in order to address the neighbors' concerns. So in doing so, they have indicated that a 10-foot setback is adequate to address this criteria. The proposed change should not have any environmental impacts. In this case, the placement of an ADU would follow the same environmental regulations that a new structure would require. So we were consistent there. The proposed change cannot have any negative impacts to public facilities. In this case, waiving all the parking requirements may have impacts to streets and parking. However, limiting the size of the accessory dwelling unit was partially designed to minimize the need for additional parking spaces. And at any rate, the state is requiring us to do the ADU change and requiring us to not have parking, so we comply with the state's requirements. By the possible impacts that we just discussed, there should not be any impacts to the transportation facilities in any way. The code requires that any text change can't have negative impacts on the economy of the area. The effect of this change will actually increase how many construction jobs there may be in the area and construction materials flowing through the area, as more people may be desiring to build accessory dwelling units. It's also going to create a new price point, hopefully, for rental units, which will also have a positive impact on the economy of the area. The amendment doesn't have any adverse impacts on housing as well, but in this case, it's for more housing. So the state is pushing this to get more housing options for the public. So this change will definitely support the goals of our comprehensive plan. Lastly, and you've seen this exhibit a couple of different times, any text change that we do, any amendment that we do to our code has to comply with the state's goals. So once again, I use the same graphic that we've used before, and I'll walk through this real quickly. The state's goals are implemented here in the city by the comprehensive plan. And so the comprehensive plan is consistent with all the state goals. The zoning is what implements our comprehensive plan. So it stands to reason that if the zoning is consistent with our comprehensive plan, so too the zone change that we're proposing tonight is also consistent with the state's goals. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed amendments to the City Council. That concludes my presentation. We're available for any questions you might have. We also passed the second version of this recommendation out through some materials that Jake passed out. And so I've changed the recommended motion you're reading here from the version in the staff report, but we also have another one that Jake passed out. Either of those are going to work for a recommendation tonight.
Okay, go ahead, Matt. Are you done?
That concludes the presentation. Now we're going to go into the deliberation we have from any planning commissioners before we do any public comments. So it looks like we have a few hands raised. So Chair, if you like, we have Commissioner Lapine that has raised her hand. I don't want to call on her because you're the chair, but if you want to call on her, you can
Yes.
deliberate a little bit.
Let's hear from Connie.
Okay, I've got a couple of things. First off, you guys made some changes at city council level on our accessory dwelling structures, and you're referring to that in here. It would have been nice to have that information prior to coming into this, because I don't know what you guys changed.
Okay, no, it's a good point. Yeah, we didn't pass that out with the staff report.
The staff report may have actually gone out before the council meeting. I'm not sure about that.
No, the council had actually made their changes before the staff report went out.
Would it be helpful to have just a very quick summary of what that was? What the change was?
It would be nice for me. I don't know how anyone else feels. Would be helpful.
There were a number of different changes. I don't know if I can recall them all off the top of my head, but I know setbacks was one of them. They felt that the sliding scale was not the most appropriate way to go about measuring impacts. We were concerned, and we put the sliding scale in to accessory structures because we didn't want somebody building a monolithic structure right next to somebody's house. And we were concerned that that might have impacts on their house, be it light and shade or their viewpoint. The city council didn't necessarily agree. They thought that a structure that was under a certain height wouldn't have the same negative impacts as anything else. And so there was a lot of deliberation at the city council level about how to address that. And they finally landed on the fact that they were just going to require a 10-foot setback on the side of any accessory structure and a 10-foot setback to the rear for any accessory structure. And so we made that change to the version going forward.
So when was there height requirements then?
There were, but I don't recall whether or not they changed the height requirement. Did you want to share your screen and take a look at that?
I can share my screen and show you what I've got. Unfortunately, it's not the red line version. So Matt, can you stop?
This is the final version. One moment, we're going to switch computers so we can show you what that looked like. There you go.
So, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
This is the version that City Council adopted. And yeah, it's not a red line strikeout version, but we can try to walk through some of the changes. Setbacks was one of them.
Hang on, I can pull up the, if you give me a second, I can pull them up side by side, both versions, if that is something you need to see.
If it pleases the chair, we can pull up the previous version and the newer version and show you what differences were made.
Sure, why don't we do that?
Because it does have impacts on the accessory dwelling unit section as well, because a number of the standards are consistent between those two. So it's certainly pertinent.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Janelle's pulling that up now.
You're still only seeing my,
Correct. Because you want to share the whole screen instead of just the one item on the screen.
I've only seen the one item.
that's on purpose right now. I'm trying to find it.
Would be in the meeting packet.
Were there any other questions we could entertain while we're pulling that up?
Yeah, I did have one other question was on section A under location, you're saying that a covered walkway can connect the two buildings, but we talked about that before where if you have a covered walkway, that's actually then making it one building per building code?
Correct. This is just clarifying that point and putting it in the code that that is indeed true.
Okay, okay. And then the one other question real quick on setbacks. When I'm reading under number 2A, those words, when I read that paragraph, I just am not picturing what you're trying to say. Sorry.
Really all we're saying is that if you have a duplex situation, then those two units are physically attached. And we wanted to make sure that somebody didn't get the false impression that it was then okay to build their detached accessory dwelling unit right on the property line as well, between those two duplexes, if they're on separate lots. And so this is saying that if you wanted to put a detached accessory dwelling unit on your duplex lot, you would still have to respect the 10-foot setback. And that's really all we're trying to say.
Okay.
If you added to the existing duplex to make it an internal accessory dwelling unit, that could stay on the setback line.
Okay. I'm just reading that and it still just doesn't make any sense to me. Okay.
Okay, so it's a little bit messy, but you should be able to see both versions side by side. The version on the right is what was actually adopted, and the version on the left was, I believe, what you recommended to council initially. So there are some changes in the maximum height, and there are some changes in the setbacks.
I don't see the setbacks on the left-hand side.
So, oh, you're right, they're down here.
Yeah, they weren't in the table on the first version.
In some ways, the version that council adopted simplified things a little bit.
Sure.
So they just said side and rear setbacks are set 5 feet and 10 feet. And then what you originally had was this side yard 5 feet plus 1 foot for every foot above 8 feet.
Right, the sliding scale. Yeah, that went away.
Yeah, that seems confusing anyway.
And they also set a maximum height of 25 feet no matter what.
Right, they wanted to keep that much more simple as well, and they felt that 25 feet tall, if it was 10 feet away from the setback, was going to be acceptable and not impact the neighbor in any way. They also changed the way we measured height, but just here on this specific section. That's why you see that note below the table that says measured from the midpoint. That's a change we're planning on making in the whole code, but it wasn't in this version of the code.
And it was made to be consistent with building code.
Right.
The way building code measures height.
Correct.
Well, I
Was
like,
that it? Was that anymore? Was there any other changes?
beg your pardon?
I was just having her scroll down. Oh, the rest is the same. So it was primarily heights and setbacks that was revised.
Okay. Well, I kind of like what the council came up with. How's the rest of you feel about that?
Works for me.
I'm fine.
Connie, is that okay with you? I think it looks good.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
I just didn't understand it. Sorry. I just didn't know what was in it.
Okay.
And again, I'll remind the planning commission that this is really a very temporary measure because we're eventually going to be changing this again holistically in our larger code, hopefully in just a few months. So this is really just a stopgap measure anyway.
I have a question. At the very beginning, I don't recall what it was because I don't have the written stuff out. One of the criteria was right now only 1 ADU per parcel allowed. Is that a state thing or why
Oh, no.
why did you say right now? Is there some kind
No,
of...
quite the opposite. The state regularly pushes cities to allow more than one accessory dwelling unit on a parcel. They would really like the only limiting factor being lot coverage. And they would like you to throw in as many there as you possibly can. Matter of fact, that's the spirit behind House Bill 2001 that is forcing larger cities to change all their codes to not allow single family homes exclusively anymore. Now, again, we don't have to worry about that. We're small enough to be flying under the wire. But the state would certainly love to see more than one accessory dwelling unit allowed. We only allowed one because I think we heard through the Planning Commission a number of times when we were doing workshops with John that the Planning Commission really only wanted 1 ADU per lot. You could certainly change that.
No. I was just wondering why it sounded like it was tentative, like right now we're only allowing 1 as opposed to only 1.
No, the plan is to allow only 1 in this version of the code and John's version of the code that will be coming to you in a few months. Both of those say just 1 ADU per lot.
Okay, that works for me.
Okay, any more discussion?
Mr. Vogler has his hand raised as well.
I do with rural lots that are on water wells. Would the ADU be on the water well, or would they have to hook up to city water?
Just before we continue, if those not speaking could mute. We're getting a lot of background from one of you, and it makes it hard for others to hear the person talking. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Can you
I
hear
think
me?
his question was about, yeah, your question was about water wells on the property and whether or not they would have to connect to city water to add an ADU. I don't believe they would. If the well they have on their property can handle the capacity of the accessory dwelling unit, then they would be allowed to share that same water well, because the only thing that's triggering the connection to city water is the lot size. And so if they're over a certain lot size, they don't need to connect.
Okay.
Now, in the new version of the code, that will be regulated by zone, because we have a rural zone in the new version of the code, but we're not there yet.
Right, right. Whereas the original house would have it, so if they put one in the backyard, they can still use a well. Okay, just checking. Thank you.
Any more comments? Beth, should we go to public testimony now?
All right, we can administer that portion for you if you like, Chair. Right now, we don't have any raised hands from any member of the public. So I suppose we'll go to the phone lines then.
Ask them if, do any of the members of the public who'd like to speak, if you would raise your hands at this point? If you are having difficulty seeing how that is, again, if you scroll to the bottom of your page that you have shown, you should see a box that pops up participants. It should say 19. If you click on that, that should pull it up to the right-hand side, and you should see a spot where you can raise a hand.
All you got to do is click on raise hand.
Yep.
So if we have no raised hands, I can go ahead and unmute all phone lines, and I can go ahead and unmute mics from computers that are not planning commission or staff members for now.
And I forgot, we should probably also give the applicants a chance to speak if they so desired. I don't know if the applicants are on the line or not. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of my partitions already. Sorry. I moved on. I was thinking of a different hearing item. I apologize. We're the applicant. Good, nothing to say.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and unmute phones. And the couple of you I see on computers, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you as well, unless it doesn't let me. And then you'll have to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak.
If you're on the phone and are wishing to speak, if you could give us the last 4 digits of your number and your name and street, I will record that, and then we can call you based on that.
My name is Robert Allen. My street number is 6049 Chandra Court Northeast, and that's in Millersburg, of course, 97321.
Can you give me the last 4 of your, or I probably could pick up.
Oh, I'm sorry, 8797.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else? Mr. Chair, Robert is the only one that we have that's indicated.
Well, we could take comments from you now.
My comments are not going to be towards the accessory dwelling. It's going to be regarding the file number PA 20-01 by Steve Helms to petition a plot that he has out here.
All right, well, we're not doing that one yet. That's
no, I understand. I just wanted to be sure that when that happened, I would have an opportunity to speak.
Well, we will call you then.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And just to clarify for everyone, we will go through this procedure with each item on the agenda. So if you don't speak up now and you still want to speak on one of those specific items, that's fine. You'll get a chance. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and mute then the members of the public again.
So we have no members of the public? Okay, then we don't need this big fancy clock. I'm gonna make this go away. And I'll go back to the PowerPoint presentation.
Mr. Straight, I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
The text change to the code references the land use, yes, the land use code. In the design section, should there be some sort of reference to the building code, how these units should be built?
Well, the building code is a separately administered code. It's not even one of ours. It's the county's. And so, yeah, we wouldn't make any reference to that in the land use code. They'll have to go through that process, of course, and adhere to any
reference to design.
I'm sorry?
We're making a reference to the design in the land use code.
Correct.
Okay.
Architectural design and structural design.
Yeah, do you mean the difference between an architectural design and a structural design?
Well, just making sure that these units are built to building code requirements.
I see. Yeah, that's on autopilot because in order to get this, they have to come in for a building permit, which means they're going to go through the county's process, and the county will be the one administering that and making sure they meet all the building code requirements.
Just wanted to make sure we weren't missing something since we were calling out the design.
They will have to be constructed in accordance with the Oregon building code.
And we don't need to state that here because they'll have to do that without us stating it here.
Generally, in our land use code, when we talk about design, we're talking about the color, pitch of roof, the more architectural features. We don't address anything to do with structural design in our land.
That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions of staff? Okay, if not, then we're going to close the public hearing and we'll go into deliberation. Anything before we make a motion on this? Any more questions, anything? Well, we have an option one here, a motion to recommend to City Council. And I'll read it to you. You've got the same thing, I assume, here. Based on the findings of fact, any testimony, the condition approval and staff recommends listed in the staff report, and because the proposed project satisfies the applicable criteria, a motion for the recommendation of adoption of the findings. Yeah?
Chair, are you reading the one off the screen?
No, I'm reading the one in my packet here.
Well, I'm not sure which one you're reading in the packet. There's a couple different motions floating around. The one from the staff report was really just staff's recommended motion. So we've added this motion for the Planning Commission. Forrest, the one on the screen that you see here is the one you were hoping for us to move forward, right?
Yes, that's the one I prefer we use. So,
okay, you want to use the one I see on the screen now?
Yes, please.
Well, the recommended motion I see on the screen, I'm assuming everybody sees it based on the above facts. The proposed text code amendment satisfies applicable criteria. Yeah. Recommend the City Council approve the application DC 20-02 and adopt the ordinance. I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, Ann has her hand up.
Ann, go ahead.
I think that's older.
Based on the above findings of fact, the proposed text code amendment satisfies the applicable criteria, and the Planning Commission recommends the City Council approval of application number DC 20-02 and adopt the ordinance.
Okay. I'm sorry. Did I hear a second?
Yes.
Is that Dennis?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Down on the left-hand corner, right-hand corner, you can vote yes or no on this. So I'll call for a vote. If you vote yes, click on the little icon down there.
What do you?
Right down on the right lower corner, you'll see where it says raise hand, and then there says yes and no. If you're voting yes, click on the green one. If you vote no, click on the red one.
Dennis hasn't voted.
Okay, I see 5 votes.
Chair, it looks like Dennis is the only one who hasn't voted. I don't know if that's intentional or if he's still looking for the button.
No, that's not intentional. I'm not finding it. I'm in favor of it.
That works too.
Well, we have a majority vote, so the motion passes. Okay, thank you. Jake, did you get that?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, mark that as a motion today. We could go to the next hearing. Here. Tonight, we're holding a public hearing regarding a Crooks Creek Southland petition, PA 20-01. The meeting will proceed as follows. A required disclosure will be read. Staff will make a presentation followed by the applicant. And anyone else who wishes to address the issue will be given the opportunity. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each for testimony. Finally, there will be time for rebuttal by the applicant. Any member of the audience that wishes to speak must raise their hand in order to testify. Commissioners may ask questions of the applicant, staff, or anyone else who testifies. I will now call the meeting to order. We're gavelled on, and Jake can read the disclosure statement, please. Jake?
Yep. Okay, all persons testifying will be deemed parties of the application and must provide their name and full mailing address. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are on the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to the criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body or the applicants an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the City Council or Land Use Board of Appeals, or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the Planning Commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearing body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance, to a date and time certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence or testimony.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Questions for the commission? Do any members of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? Do any members of the commission wish to report any site visits or ex parte contacts? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the commission to hear this matter? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosure of any member of the commission? Okay, if not, we'll go to the staff report.
Mr.
Well,
Chair?
Chair, before we go into that, we wanted to give a moment to be able to unmute folks on the line just in case they did have an objection to any of those questions that you just went through.
Good idea. Thank you.
So Janelle is going to unmute everybody, and if somebody has a concern about one of those questions you just heard, feel free to chime in or raise your hand.
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve. I did a site visit on both of them.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I did a site visit for this parcel.
Okay.
You asked that question and I didn't get it, so.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Commissioner Rom, I know Mr. Helms professionally, if that's any concern.
Well, have you had any conversation with him over that?
No.
Well, then that would be no problem then. Okay, anyone else? Okay, Matt, would you go ahead?
All right, thank you, Chair. Fellow Commissioners, Matt Straight again, presenting for staff. The project before you tonight proposes a partition which is located just north of Trask Lane. The zoning on the site is RR 10 acre minimum urban conversion. Now, to provide a little bit of background on this property might look a little bit familiar to you. In 2019, the applicant received approval for a partition of the property, as you can see here on the screen. Now, state law says that once a partition is approved and recorded, after 1 year has passed, the applicant can partition once again. The 1 year period has passed, and 2 different property owners have now brought forward 3 different partitions, as you can see here on the screen in front of you. The first partition to the far south is PA 2001, and that's the one we're discussing right now. We're calling that Crooks Creek South. The middle partition, PA 2002, has been submitted, but it hasn't come to the Planning Commission yet. Janelle and I directed the applicant to add a street to that proposal, and the applicant subsequently put that project on hold. And that's the same applicant as the one for Crooks Creek South. The parcel you see at the top, PA 2003, is Stephen Smith's project, and we're going to be discussing that one next. So we just wanted to put all of that into perspective here and make sure that everybody understood how those related to each other, and that even though they're doing this partition again here, that is legal and conforms with the state's rules and our rules. So the applicant on this partition is proposing to partition 2.44 acres into 3 parcels. The first one is 0.93 acres and is shown in blue here on the slide. The second one is 1.21 acres, and the third one is 0.3 acres. Now, once again, in order to support the project tonight, we have to make sure that it satisfies the criteria from our development code, so we're going to walk through those now. Based on staff's review, the project does not conflict with any comprehensive plan policies or state goals. The project does not conflict with any of our city codes or ordinances. Once again, this may look like a serial partition, but they waited the 1 year between, so it's consistent with our rules and they're allowed to do that. The lots will also have to connect to water and sewer to be consistent with our code. Any proposed parcel that can be further divided in the future must be designed in a way where it too can be further divided in the future. And so parcels 1 and 3 cannot be further divided based on the design and based on the river there to the north of it, or the waterway to the north of it. Parcel 2 can, however, be further divided, and the applicant worked with staff to design this map in a way where that center parcel could be redivided in the future should they so decide to do that. So it meets this criteria requirement. The map also cannot be designed in a way to preclude future development of neighboring properties in any way. The property to the west and the south of this site is generally already developed and they couldn't be subdivided any further. So the design that the applicant is proposing isn't hurting their chances of dividing in the future at all. The property to the north and east has floodplain and other natural restrictions to further development, so the design of the applicant isn't hurting their ability to subdivide in the future in any way. So it's consistent with that criteria requirement. The code allows the city to require streets on partitions. So with this project, there are good arguments for the need for a street going into this project, and there are good arguments against it. In the staff report, we went into quite a bit of detail going through this point, because the code really lets it go either way. It really does depend on what the commission would like to see here. And so what we did, Janelle and I, was we added 2 different sets of conditions of approval. They can either require the street to be built now with this project prior to the recording of the map, or they could be built later. And to get a little bit more specific, I wanted to kind of go through some facts about the street as they relate to this project. if we defer the need for a street, it really does, to a small scale, kick the can down the road and require the next guy to build the street. Now, that would only be needed if the next guy further divided parcel 2. He wouldn't have to, and then everything would be fine. And 3 lots, as we've talked about at great length in the past, 3 lots can share a driveway, which means that parcel 2 could theoretically carve off 1 more lot, and that would only leave 3 parcels coming off of Trask Lane, and therefore you still wouldn't need a street for that. You wouldn't have to have a street. That doesn't mean you couldn't require a street anyway, because the code allows the Planning Commission to do that. Parcel 2 could technically, in a theoretical way, be divided in up to 5 different lots. Now, there would be no street requirements if we go with the no street requirement, then the applicant would have to enter waivers of remonstrance on these, or enter into a remonstrance agreement with us, which basically said that if a street was ever put in there, the people who own those properties would have to pay their fair share of the street's construction at that time. Streets or sidewalks, goes both ways. So at this time, I forgot to put that on the last slide, but at this time, staff is recommending that we move forward without a street need for this project. And the primary reason, again, laid out in great detail in the staff report, is because up to 3 parcels or lots can do a shared driveway. And since they're only doing the 2, we felt it was probably appropriate at this stage to not require a street to be built. But we feel that the right-of-way should be dedicated for a future street should that be needed. Now, again, the commission can go the other way if they want. Fully up to the Planning Commission. So moving on with the other criteria, the city water and sewer are available at 2 locations near the site, and both have capacity to accommodate this development. And the design of the infrastructure by the applicant doesn't preclude any neighboring property from developing, because as we pointed out, no other neighboring properties could further develop. Though the site is not anticipated to present any drainage concerns, the developer didn't provide staff with enough information to determine all the possible impacts. So we've added a condition of approval that requires a site-specific drainage plan prior to recording the final plat. The site features wooded areas, and our code says that there can't be any adverse impacts to natural features, and then it lists those. One of those on the list is wooded areas. But the code doesn't offer us any kind of guidance for what to do in the instance that there is a wooded area on site. So what we did was we turned to the new tree ordinance that we have. And the new tree ordinance explains which trees can and cannot be removed. And we'll need a tree study in order to know that. Now, a tree study doesn't have to be a formal arborist-supported tree study, but we need the applicant or somebody to give us an analysis of how many trees there are on the site and the circumference of those trees, diameter of those trees, one of those 2, to tell us if the new tree ordinance would apply to it or not. If they do apply to any of those trees, they would have to get tree removal permits in order to remove those at the point where they're building homes, not at the map stage. Again, the map itself is really just a paper exercise. It's just kind of carving up the lots, unless we're requiring construction of streets. And so at this point, there wouldn't be any impacts. Those would be done at the housing level instead. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project with the conditions of approval listed. And staff is available for any questions. I don't know if the applicant is on the line. He may be. But the applicant and myself are available for any questions you might have. The applicant being Steve Helms.
Thank
that
you,
concludes our...
Is the applicant present in the audience?
Hang on, we're going to unmute everybody.
I'm unmuting all the phone lines that don't have names associated with them.
We don't see the applicant on the video lines because they give us the names if they chime in with video, but for phone numbers, we only see phone numbers. So I don't know if he's on the line. Everybody's unmuted now. Steve, you out there?
Yes, I am.
No, not Steve Vogler, Steve Helms.
Oh.
I see you, Chairman Vogler.
Hey, we got a bunch of Steves going today.
Not Chairman, Commissioner. Okay, it appears the applicant is not on the line, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the planning commission might have.
Okay, any of the members want to ask Matt any questions? Any clarification?
We have one hand raised by Commissioner Vogler. I keep mixing up the title.
Yeah, it's me. You're talking about the Trask Lane Road there of not building it. Are you talking
Correct.
just from the property line to the Hammerhead part? Because Trask, there's parcel 19 and 1900 and 1800 just south of that. Where is these folks going to build their road from?
So the current existing Trask Lane extends to the edge of those lots that you're seeing.
Right.
So right up to the edge of this guy's property.
Correct.
Okay.
And so the question to the planning commission was really, do we need to require a street built here? And I'll be honest, this is something that Janelle and I really struggled with as we were reviewing this project. Because one of the reasons that people could potentially do a sequence of partitions is to avoid building roads. And this is a sequence of partitions that was done. And so we gave it a very stern look to see whether or not we felt the road would be needed. And we ultimately concluded that we didn't think it was, but it's certainly within the purview of the planning commission to disagree with staff and require a street for this project.
We also tried to, there have been a lot of discussions with the new code and the intent of how this is to be handled. So that's why there are two options here for you, the way we wrote it all the way.
Without us having them build that Hammerhead Street, what are they going to use as a street? Just a rock driveway, or?
They would still be required to build
It's a shared driveway.
shared driveway, 20-foot wide normally.
Right. But you're talking about a 20-foot shared driveway that would be paved between those two. And it probably wouldn't have to come all the way to the Hammerhead, I wouldn't think, would it? But they could just come in the property and go both ways and put driveways there.
It would have still to meet fire requirements.
Sure.
Versus a full city street with curb gutter sidewalks and the full width.
And you can see here that the applicant did work with staff. We raised these issues with the applicant too, and they did provide right here on the map a 52-foot access easement. And the idea behind that is if we need the right of way for the future street, it's there.
Correct.
But the applicant felt it wasn't appropriate to build a street here, understandably so.
And the future street is the Hammerhead.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Well, I mean, they could turn it into a cul-de-sac if they did a larger division in there. And again, theoretically, they could put 5 lots in there. Actually, they probably couldn't when they set out to design it. But based on just the square footage totals, 5 could fit.
Yeah, especially when they're not going to let them cut all those trees up, probably.
Right.
Place is jam-packed with trees.
It is jam-packed with trees.
Yes, it is.
But it was tough for us as staff because all those trees are not very thick. There's a lot of them, but they're
skinny.
They're all 6 inches in diameter-ish. Yeah. And I didn't run in there to see if there were any larger ones because that really is the onus is on the applicant for that, not on staff.
And if anyone's not aware, the threshold in the tree ordinance is a 6.5-foot circumference trunk, which is about a 24-inch diameter.
That's a big tree.
Yeah.
Anything below that can be taken out without a permit.
Correct.
A lot of firewood there.
So the existing street now is actually, the right-of-way of Trask is actually 52 feet wide, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So they're going to set aside 52 feet, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, that seems appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Any more discussion?
I see another hand raised. Annie's got a hand raised.
Okay. Ann?
It seems to me that the as long as the easement is there, that kind of takes us off the hook of requiring a road right now, a driveway right now. I mean, as long as the easement is there, we know it can be done. So I'm happy with just the easement.
Well, if you stop and think about it, I think that's a great idea, but you know, in the past, we've fought with property owners that have ended up later on having to put in streets and weren't aware that they were going to have to. And you know, this situation has come up before, so it's a tricky question to deal with, whether to require a street now or someone to pay up front later. So this is what we have to decide. Staff recommends that we pass it the way it is.
I'm not seeing where to raise my hand, so I'm just going to butt in here. I'm not comfortable with a private driveway. As I'm walking down the street, I'm seeing other projects that have 6 houses on a private driveway and 4 houses on a private driveway. I really don't like the idea of kicking this down the road to a homeowner that could very well be unaware that he's going to be on the hook for the cost of a street. When I moved into my house, I had no idea the CC&Rs that are in place here. And I can see a second or third owner down the road not having any idea that they're on the hook for that street.
Forrest, do you want to make a comment?
Well, certainly, we just need to make sure it's clarified on the deed. It's a restriction on the deed, and that's noted. And it will then just be important that in the preliminary title report, that should be disclosed. So the importance is just we need to make sure that it goes on any deed. But again, it is always difficult to hit somebody with the idea that eventually they may need to end up paying. I presume somebody who's going to be a potential purchaser may at that time, if they are aware, that they would come in and talk with the city and try to get an idea of what the cost may be before they close the deal.
Correct. And again, that's why Janelle and I have required a waiver of remonstrance for those lots moving forward. That doesn't do a lot, but what it does do is work into the title deed a document that they should be aware of if they read the fine print. But Commissioner Gunner's got a great point. People often don't read those kind of disclosures, and they might not realize that if and when a street did go in, they would have to pay their fair share of that, which would not be a small amount of money.
Well, my thought is for somebody that buys this lot the third time down the road, somebody buys it and sells it and buys it and sells it, and the third person comes down and has no clue that they're on the hook for probably hundreds of thousands of dollars for a street, tens of thousands at the minimum. I'm just not comfortable with it. I do understand that it's perfectly legal right now to feed the 2 houses and even a third off of a private driveway, but I see what has happened here in the street in the city in the past, and I'm concerned about it. We're hoping to stop that sort of thing.
You know, a lot of the work we did on our workshop was just to eliminate this situation, actually, if you recall that. So I'm getting a feeling that some people would like to see a street and some seem to think it's okay the way it is. Any more comments on that?
I guess I would say buyer beware, and I support the staff's recommendation.
Ann, what do you think?
I agree with that.
Connie? Connie, you want to answer here?
Well, I got to figure out how to unmute, right? I've never been this quiet before, have I?
I'm wondering.
Well, I'm split because I absolutely hear what Dennis is saying, and it's been a struggle, and it's not where we want to go. But I also see what staff is trying to do, but I'm struggling with that. I just don't know. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle of the two. That doesn't help with my vote, but I don't want to see us go back. Now, I have a lot of faith in staff. I get all that, but I hear what Dennis is saying 100%. Nobody reads the fine print. And certainly the real estate agents are not going to be telling people that you're going to owe tens of thousands of dollars or whatever it is. I don't know what it's going to be to sell that piece of property. They might not find out about it until they get to the title company and is sitting down and getting ready to sign.
I don't know. I don't know. I think a realtor could get in real hot water for that.
Yeah, but do they really care? I mean, do they really care? We had that. We had that happen to us in this house where we were told we would not need flood insurance. And when we got to the title company, it's, oh, by the way, you either pay it or we don't close, which we had to close. So I guess I'm worried about that for people. That's all I have to say. I'm going to have to think a little more on it.
Pat, let me ask you a question here. When you dealt with the applicant, was he conducive to putting a street in, or was he?
No, sir. Flat out no.
Matter of fact,
if we fire the street on this, we'll probably complain about it.
Well, there you go, folks.
So does that mean we say we do what he wants, or is this going to be what we want for the city?
Well, that's a good question. We've been opposed to this. We've been trying to eliminate it, and this is one chance to start doing that. You know, if we kick the can down the road, then it's going to come up again and again, and we're setting another precedent, and I don't like to see that.
I don't like to see it either.
It seems like when we had the issue with the mobile home park, the neighbors that had the houses right next to it bought from some realtors that were represented as Millersburg Real Estate, and they were under the impression that it was the city of Millersburg that was giving them the information directly that that property could never be developed. Now, the developer kind of fudged that a little bit, and those poor people were kind of left holding a bag, so to speak. And I worry about that sort of thing.
Well, if you want to chew on it for a little bit more, we could go to the public comment section and give everybody a little bit of time to stew on it.
Well, let's do that.
All right, Chair. Well, in that case, I think we'll take over the reins then. And if anybody out there would like to speak, if you're on video, if you could raise your hand, then we'll take you in the order that the hands were raised. We will unmute all the phone lines after that.
Robert Allen, would you like to speak into the phone?
Hello?
We're not seeing any video hands raised, and so I suppose we'll go to the phone now. We did have one person who wanted to speak on the phone who commented.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead and speak.
Oh, okay, thank you. Robert Allen, 6049 Chandler Court. Thank you, commissioners, for giving me an opportunity to talk. And my discussion is in opposition to this partition, and I'll tell you why. In reviewing the narrative application narrative, it talks about no development is planned at this time, et cetera, et cetera. And I talked to Steve Helms on Sunday. He and his son were out putting out survey markers, and I asked him what his plans were, and he said that he was planning, he's already engaged a builder from Lebanon that builds high-end homes, and he said that he was planning on just having 3 homes built back there. Now, that's a little bit different than what I'm hearing the commission talk, where it could be up anywhere to 4 to 5 different dwellings. And in terms of, there are wetlands surrounding this property. And if you had seen this property in January, even though it was a fairly dry winter, there was standing water on the entire lot, not only just the wetlands, but the other portions of that. And so then to say that this isn't going to require any buildup or culverting or anything like that, I think is a little disingenuous. All of the surrounding property, at least on our street, we're anywhere 3 to 4 feet above the elevation of the property as it stands. And in terms of the 24, 25-inch diameter trees, there are moldable 24, 25-inch diameter trees. So I'm not able to really follow what his application and his other documents are saying to what he told me on Sunday. And then on Sunday, he had 4 or 5 people. He was taking them through the lot, showing them this, that, the other thing. So I just think the commission has not got enough information, and I can appreciate the hard work that staff has put in on this. I think it's just a little bit ill-timed and ill-thought out, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt, would you like to address that?
Sure. The fact that the property could be wet is something that we addressed because we didn't get a drainage study, but we did require one prior to the map recording. And so they're going to have to prove to us how that drains, and it's going to have to drain according to our engineering standards appropriately. Regarding the trees, we also don't know about the trees. However, we require a tree study to be provided to us that would indicate where those trees are and are not. And again, the tree removal permits would be tied more to the building themselves than they would be the subdivision of the property of anyway.
The number of homes.
Oh, and the number of homes, there was some confusion about that. I apologize if there was confusion over the number of homes. We were just trying to say that right now, the applicant is proposing to only divide into 3 lots. He's proposing 3 homes. He's not even proposing homes at this time. He's only proposing lots that would only be able to accommodate 3 homes. However, one of those lots is large enough where it could divide in the future. And I apologize, Mr. Allen, if that confused a little bit. But the reason we have to look at that is because we have a criteria in our code that says if it can be further divided, you have to show us that that's possible. And in this case,
I can certainly appreciate that. Okay.
That's all.
All right.
Well,
yeah. Well, let's see if there's anybody else out there that wanted to speak. Again, we're not seeing any hands raised on the video lines, but if there's anybody on the phones that would like to speak, we have unmuted you at this point, and so feel free to speak up and we'll get you in here.
I would like to. This is Phyllis Hinshaw.
Go ahead, Phyllis.
Okay, and I live on Chandra, right at the corner. I think I was the first house built here on Chandra. And I know that when I bought this place, not the realtor, but the contractor himself told me that they would never build back there because it was considered wetlands. And so he sold it to me as a primo lot. So that was kind of a concern of mine. Plus, you know, there's a lot of wildlife back there that I watch. You know, there's the, I hear the owls. I've never seen them, but I've seen the woodpeckers, the deer, you know, all kinds of things out there. And so, you know, I have also another concern as far as, you know, wildlife refuge, where we're chasing all these wildlife away. And I know that my property is up higher too, but I have a problem even with water, you know, here, even with coming up through my gravel at times.
Well, like our engineer explained, that's one of the problems that has to be dealt with before he can get permits. That's one of the conditions. I don't know if you read the whole packet or not, but one of the conditions is to mitigate the water problem.
Well, I know I also ran into him a couple days before because he had someone come out here with a brush hog and start, you know, getting the blackberries and everything down. And when I called the property owner because the guy that came out here ended up damaging something in my backyard, which, you know, he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, I need to talk to the property owner. So I did. I called Steve and talked to him. And he's under the assumption that it's a done deal. I mean, he told me there was no reason for him not to be approved. So that was, I mean, you know, I just took it that he been talking to you guys about this, and that is kind of a done deal.
Well, it's not a done deal. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your input.
If you want me to clarify that a bit, Chair, I'm happy to. If you look at the exhibit on the screen now, you can see that the wetland areas have been officially delineated, and that's a very complicated process that a landowner has to go through to show where those are, and a state agency has to come in, chime in, and agree that that was appropriately done. So in this case, the wetlands have been mapped and are shown on the actual map, and that's something that Janelle and I look at very closely when we review maps to make sure that there are actual places where homes could go, and that those home locations wouldn't be impacting the wetlands in any way.
I would add, being designated as wetlands doesn't mean an area that's not designated as wetlands is not necessarily completely dry all the time. You can have standing water in an area and have it not be designated wetlands. This is a regulatory designation, and there's a process to go through if you want to develop in wetlands. So just because a property has wetlands on it does not actually prevent it from being developable. It just, there are permits and processes involved in doing so. So although there are technical challenges with developing this property, even putting a few homes on it from a drainage standpoint, those are all a part of the process after, that typically takes place after the land use approval. So just because those aren't addressed in detail now doesn't mean they wouldn't be addressed before the homes went in. They would have to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a hand raised from a speaker named Justin. If you want to give us your name and address, we'll get that on the record.
And I am unable to unmute you, so you will need to unmute yourself.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's working or not. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, Justin, I live at 2825 Sonora Drive, which is the very end of Sonora Drive. Phyllis is the neighbor across the street from me, and we both moved in pretty close to the same. We were the first house on Sonora. She was the first house on Chandra. And everything she stated, I mean, we have our back windows face Steve's property and his neighbor's property, and we have video proof how much standing water there is in the fall and the winter. I mean, it's literally like a lake back there. We were also told the same thing. It was undevelopable. It's wetlands, just on and on. And Robert said the same thing. You know, we've all been kind of told the same thing, and now to hear that, hey, it's developable, and I've spoken with Steve as well, and they're saying the same exact thing that I heard. He was out here on Sunday with a chainsaw cutting back trees.
Okay, was there anything else?
Nope.
Okay, then Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, the way I see it, we can make a motion either way. I think we're required to we have to pass this one way or the other. The men.
I can clarify this a little bit more for you too as well. The way we wrote the conditions of approval, if you decide that a driveway is okay and not a street, then condition of approval number 4 can remain the way it is, and you can just leave it intact. If you decide that you want a street in there and no driveway, or the driveway itself should be a street, then you would leave condition of approval 4 the way it is, but you would strike the second half of it. And we've split that into a subsection A and a subsection B. So if the Planning Commission decides you want a street, you would simply strike subsection B. Do I have that right, Janelle?
Yes.
All right.
I have a question for Forrest.
Certainly welcome to deny the whole map based on the access if you so desire. I didn't mean to make it sound like you didn't have options.
Did you want to ask Forrest a question?
Yes. Forrest,
Forrest?
are there any legal ramifications for the city of not requiring the road, just doing the easement, and somebody coming back in 20 years and saying, I didn't know about that?
No.
The buyer beware.
A condition of approval, and then it's really out of the hands of the city, except that what is required is that they need to bring back, at the time the deed is recorded, we need to make sure that this restriction is placed on the deed. If it's placed on the deed, we are good. And it needs to be placed on a deed that is what's called running with the property, meaning that whoever owns that property inherits that deed or assumes that deed with that restriction on there. Now, though, if the deed is recorded and it is not put on there, it's going to be difficult for us to enforce that. And secondly, that if we try to enforce it, the city may be running into some ramifications. But if everything works as is planned, the city is not responsible for somebody purchasing and finding out 20 years from now that it's a requirement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I have a question for Janelle then. On the idea, we're looking at all these wetlands and we're hearing testimony about lakes, etc., and wildlife. I'm wondering what would prevent the city from approval of this if we approved this tentatively. What would be the criteria that the city would use not to go through with it as far as wetlands, et cetera, is concerned?
Well, we wouldn't, from a wetlands perspective, as long as they had met all the requirements of Department of State Lands, because we don't regulate wetlands, the technical definition of wetlands. There is a condition of approval. It's number 7, prior to approval of final plat, and you've seen this condition a lot. It's the same one we put on subdivisions, partitions. It says, Land Development Code Section 5/126(7) states stormwater runoff rates for new developments shall not exceed their land runoff rates, and runoff from impervious surfaces must be collected and transported to a natural or public drainage facility with sufficient capacity to accept the drainage. The developer is required to provide a site-specific drainage plan, including means to detain peak flows so that the runoff rates for the new development do not exceed their land runoff rates, along with supporting calculations to collect, route, and discharge stormwater to an approved discharge point. The drainage plan must be approved by the city engineer prior to recording the final plat. Drainage plans shall conform to the city, I should say City of Millersburg engineering design standards to the satisfaction of the city engineer. So before they can record the final plat, so they can get your approval, but before they can finalize this land division, they've got to satisfy that criteria. And there are a lot of different engineering ways to do that. Some are more costly than others, so that would be up to the developer and their engineer to come up with a plan and propose it to the city for review, and we'd have to be able to buy off on that. So they've got to show what water ran off initially from this property and how they're going to keep it to that same level. In this case, Cricks Creek is directly adjacent to the northeast side of this, so their discharge point is very nearby, but they have to satisfy that requirement before we would finalize this division. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And Janelle?
So my understanding then, from a commission perspective, is that considering the conditions of approval, if the conditions of approval are met, then this meets all that criteria, and we have no option but to approve it, but with either A or B, with with the street or without the street. Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
Unless you disagree with the analysis that staff had in the staff report and you feel that the applicant is not meeting one of those criteria, and you could then deny the project based on the fact that they're not meeting the criteria, but you would have to tell us as staff what your findings are for how they don't satisfy that criteria. And just as a side note, Chair, I don't know if you wanted to close the public hearing, because right now we're still in the public testimony portion of the hearing.
Well, let's close the public hearing then. Okay. I've got a question for you, Matt.
All right.
This whole locale out there is very low and flat country. It always has and always will have a drainage problem. Why can't staff make a requirement that they do these studies before they make the application or with the application, so we don't have to go through this? Is there a
We
reason?
certainly could. Matter of fact, our application asks for this information up front. We just don't normally get this kind of level of detail from applicants prior to or with their submittal. But we certainly could make that an incompleteness issue and tell them they're incomplete in the future and turn them away for it. But because the impacts don't really come into play until afterwards, the way we have it conditioned, we felt meets that requirement.
And this has been how we've typically been handling these, because this condition applies to subdivisions, partitions in particular. And for the most part, especially at the subdivision level, you don't want to design that system. It's pretty costly to have an engineer design your drainage system and go back and forth with the city till you have something approved, till you get to a detailed design level of the whole subdivision. And so at this stage, they're not usually there yet. We could have them submit some preliminary calcs to show that it's possible to meet it, but they would still have to go through that final design step. It's really about the fact that people don't generally want to spend that money until they know they have a project that's going to be able to move forward on all other merits before they invest that money.
And in the event that they came forward with a drainage plan that we disagreed with and we agreed to disagree, they couldn't record the map and the map would simply expire and it would never move forward because they have to satisfy this condition before it moves forward, and the condition states to the satisfaction of the city engineer. So really, we still have our hands on the wheel at that point. And if we disagree with what the applicant's saying, we can say, you know what? You're not satisfying the condition of approval and your map is going to expire.
Okay. Well, why don't we go on? I think at this point, unless there's any more comments, I'm going to ask for a motion, and you have two choices. You go with A or B. You can make a motion to pass with the road or without it. So what's your pleasure?
Which is A or B?
Excuse me, there is, Chair, and this is Forrest Reed, there is a third option. So I want the commissioners to understand it doesn't have to be, the motion doesn't have to be pass it with A or pass it with B. I mean, there is a third option that Matt had alluded to, was that you move to not pass it because you believe some condition has not been approved.
Well, if you make that motion, then you have to state why you're making that motion, correct?
Exactly.
Perfectly
yes.
correct. And give us the findings to backfill that, correct?
Yes.
Well, is there any commissioner feel that they have an objection and they can verify it and just make a statement to that effect?
Could I ask another question?
Sure.
Well, not so much ask another question. I guess I just want to, the more I think about this, the more I think about how many times I've heard those same stories of people being told by their real estate agents that such and such wasn't going to happen or this wasn't going to happen. And it just kind of fries me that those kind of things are happening out in our community, but it does. So for me, I've watched all these private streets go in and more houses on them. And I'm just sitting here kind of going, no, we made rules for our new code on purpose for this not to happen anymore. And I'm really feeling that we just need to put a street in there. We know his intention. Why is it that the developer gets off and it's on the back of the people owning the land. I think it's wrong.
He is the owner of the land.
No, he's not going to be the owner of the land because he's selling it for profit.
Well, that's maybe.
He's selling it for profit.
Maybe.
And no, well, do you think he's going to build on it, Steve? I'm not.
He can anticipate anything until it happens, and it's not a deal.
Understand, but he's a developer, so he's in this for the money.
No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and
I'd be asking the same things if I was him.
You know, and so the thing is that we're kicking the can down the road to the people that want to come live here. And I think it's a really bad way for people to move into this town with the bad taste in their mouth of, oh, now I owe 20,000 or whatever the money is. I don't know. So it's true, Steve. You can laugh all you want.
Their own fault. It's their own fault.
Well, it isn't. Because people aren't always honest, and unfortunately,
the real estate agent says it's not wetlands. I'm going to check with the state. I'm sorry.
Well, okay, I hear you. I do.
I hear you. I see you shaking your head, Mark.
Yes, I agree with. I have to agree with Steve on that. There's so many resources out there to verify if a parcel of land is considered in a flood zone or not. If you're concerned, you can check with a lender and they will run an address for you. You can go to the county themselves, and there are a myriad of resources for buyers to double check themselves. If I'm going to spend as much money as it costs for a chunk of ground out here, I'm not going to take the word of someone I don't know. I'm going to go back it up with information that I can verify. And I think a prudent buyer is going to do that.
But the problem is we're not talking about flood zones. You're right. That's really easy to find out, and anybody ought to be doing that. We're talking about whether or not
remonstrance is attached to the deed. It's always going to be there. So whenever I pull a title report and the realtor that I'm buying the property through hands me that listing pack, it better have that remonstrance in it, and there better be an exception on the title referencing that remonstrance. If there isn't, then the city's in trouble. And as Mr. Reed pointed out, if everything goes as planned, that will be there and we wouldn't have that issue down the line. I would know as a buyer that there's an extra added to this piece of property that I could be on the hook for at some future date.
I hear you, but I still, you know, we have just had so much of this going on and it just needs to stop. And I think we're trying to stop it, but I don't know. That's just how I feel. Thanks.
Then I think if you want to stop it, then the code itself needs to be changed. But right now we have, in my opinion, an application that the staff has presented to us that meets the criteria with options.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't think we're the moral police of the developers either.
Well, that's true. Well, any more comments? Do we want to kick the can down the road, or are we going to take some action on this? And I know we've been, we really hate to see any more of the narrow access, and we're trying to do away with this and bring the streets in. What's your pleasures, folks?
I'll move that we accept the staff's report with option 2.
You mean option B? You mean option B?
That's for the private driveway.
Yeah, the private driveway.
Okay, so to clarify, that would be leaving the conditions as is, because right now the private driveway is the way they're written. But if you wanted to make it a street, you would have to delete 4B. So just clarifying that.
As option 2 is presented on the application I'm looking at, the private driveway meeting all fire apparatus access requirements, etc.
Correct. The way that condition 4 is written, it says a road is, basically A says the road is required to be built, but B says alternatively, they can do the private driveway. So leaving both in means that the applicant can choose because you've given him both options.
Mark is going off of page 5 of the staff report, which does break it down into an option 1 and an option 2. So that's where Commissioner Rom is coming from. I certainly hear what you're saying. Option 2 would be just leaving the conditions of approval the way they are and not requiring a public street to be built. So
you're proposing option 2 then?
Yes.
That's okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that one.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. You can vote down yes or no on your icons down below. Green is yes, red is no.
Oh.
Again, I'm not finding those, so I just vote that I am opposed.
I'm sorry.
This is Dennis. I'm not finding the green and red, so I'm voting verbally. I am opposed.
Okay. Jake, give us the count, would you please?
Right now I have, excuse me, 3 against and 3 in favor.
Well, there's only 6 of us here.
So the motion does not pass.
So the motion does not pass.
Correct.
Thank you, Forrest.
Yes.
Well, thank you everyone for your input.
Yeah, so we'll have to come up with an alternative motion then. Because the denying a motion to approve doesn't equate to a denial of the project. If you want to make a motion to deny the project, that will have to be a separate motion. So the first motion has failed. Now the floor is open to make yet another motion going whichever way that person would like to make the motion.
I'm going to clear all the symbols just so it's clean slate.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain another motion then.
And excuse me, this is Forrest again. Jake, were you able to write down who voted for and who voted against? Because I wasn't able to see Connie's vote.
Would you like a summary of them?
Yes, if you can. Yes, please.
So I have President Kirkendall was a nay. Commissioner Lapine was a for. Commissioner Rom was for. Commissioner Gunner was against. Commissioner Vogler was against, and Commissioner Peltier was for.
No, I voted.
Right.
I voted against it, Jake.
Yes,
oh, there it is.
Yeah, so let's make sure we have this vote correct. So I'm hearing Commissioner Lapine say she voted against it, and Commissioner Vogler said he voted for it. Is that correct, commissioners, for you two?
Yes.
Okay. So Jake, we'll let you go back and maybe clarify this.
Okay, so for the motion, like in favor of, I had Commissioner Rom, Commissioner Vogler, and Commissioner Peltier. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And against the motion, I had President Kirkendall, Commissioner Lapine, and Commissioner Gunner.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, folks.
Tell them to look at the deal. It says chair.
I'm sorry. So let's see. We were discussing about where we stand right now in the process. So it's now back to you, President Kirkendall, as to whether there's going to be another motion to be made.
Well, I would entertain another motion. Does someone want to make a motion that we vote against the motion?
Could we make a motion to postpone it till we have our other commissioner on hand next time?
You could continue it, and that is a very legitimate reason to continue an item, sure.
I think we have to postpone because I don't think any of the three on either side are going to change their mind if we represent.
Well, that's why I said we need the other member.
I
Or
agree.
we have an odd number.
Well, there is, excuse me, there is another option. You can make a motion for continuance.
Oh, okay, there you go. Same.
And then you can set a date. So, what would we ask for time on that?
Well, whatever. Do we
Probably
think?
a better question for Jake than it is.
Yeah,
I'm not. When would the next planning commission meeting be? The regularly scheduled. May 19th.
The third Tuesday of next month would be the 19th of May.
So
that's the next.
It would be our regularly scheduled.
Well, does somebody want to make a motion that we ask for a continuance until next month's meeting? We have to make a motion to do it.
How close would that be to our 120-day rule?
Matt, do you hear what Jake?
I'm sorry, Jake, say that one more time.
If we continued it for an additional month, how close would that be on our 120-day rule? Are we mixing up at all on that?
No, we'd be okay. We can get one continuance in there, and we're going to be all right.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to continue PA 20-01 Crooks Creek South land partition to our next scheduled planning commission meeting.
Okay, I have a motion. I need a second.
I'll second it. This is Ann.
Okay, and we have a second. Let's vote on that then. All in favor, vote yes. All opposed, vote no.
Aye.
All right, Jake, you want to give us a rundown of those votes then?
I have all 6 in favor.
Okay, the motion carries then. We will continue to the next meeting.
Just for the record, that's going to be May 19th at 6 p.m., I believe.
That's what I'm tracking.
Okay.
Okay.
Very well then, Chair, if you want to introduce the next item, we can.
I'm going to do that right now. Introducing public hearing PA 20-03. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, tonight we're going to hold a public hearing regarding the land petition PA 2003. The meeting will proceed as follows. A required disclosure will be read. Staff will make a presentation followed by the applicant. And then anyone else who wishes to address the issue will be given the opportunity. Members of the public will have 3 minutes for each testimony. And finally, there will be time for questions. Members in the audience can raise their hands. So we now are going to call a public meeting to order. Jake, can you read the disclosure statement?
Yes. All persons testifying will be deemed parties of the application and must provide their name and full mailing address. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to the criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body or the applicants an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the City Council or Land Use Board of Appeals, or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the Planning Commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearing body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance, to a date or to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence or testimony.
Thank you, Jake. Do any of the members of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? Any members of the commission wish to report any site visits or ex parte contacts?
I visited a site.
Okay. Did you have any contact with anyone?
No.
Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the commission to hear this matter? Or does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosure of any member of the commission? And if you want to open up for public, we'll see if anyone objects to that.
Yeah, we'll unmute the line now, Chairman, and see if anybody out there has any objections or concerns with those questions.
Okay.
All right, we're seeing no hands raised and all the phones have been unmuted, and we're hearing nobody say that they have any concerns with those issues.
Okay, why don't you go ahead with the staff report then?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. Fellow Commissioners, Matt Straight once again, presenting for staff. The project before you tonight proposes a partition along the south side of Millersburg Lane near Noel Lane, or sorry, Millersburg Drive near Noel Lane. The zoning on the site is rural residential 10-acre minimum urban conversion. And again, this partition is proposed here in the same location we discussed last time, except this one is located at the top. This is Mr. Steve Smith's partition of one lot into two. Again, because a year passed, this is not considered a serial partition and is allowed pursuant to our code. More specifically, the applicant is proposing to partition 0.76 acres into two parcels. Parcel 1 is proposed at 19,000 square feet. Parcel 2 is proposed at 14,000 square feet. Access will actually not come directly from Millersburg Drive, but from a neighboring shared driveway. And I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on that. So more specifically here, you can see the applicant's property. It's labeled. The property to the south of the applicant's site has a flag lot style driveway based on the previous partition that was approved, and that's on the west side of the applicant's property. The applicant is going to propose taking access from these two proposed parcels onto that shared driveway. This will leave 3 homes taking access from the same driveway, which is something that we've discussed before. The staff is concurring is all right and consistent with our code. So that's the project description. Let's walk through the criteria now. Based on staff's review, the project does not conflict with any comprehensive plans or state's goals. The project does not conflict with any city ordinances. Again, it may appear to be a serial partition, but a year passed between them, so this is allowed. And all the lots will be required to connect to city water and sewer. Any proposed parcel that can be further divided in the future has to be designed to accommodate that. Now, with this project, it wasn't quite as clear as, say, the last one. Parcel 1 is proposed at 19,000 square feet, and parcel 2 is 13,000 square feet. So typically, parcel 2 could be reduced like this to allow further subdivisions to that property. However, the house that is currently under construction, completed with construction, almost completed, on parcel 1 is now existing. And based on the way it is situated, it would make further divisions of these properties very unlikely. Therefore, the project has been designed with a 19,000 square foot lot to satisfy the criteria, and staff finds that it's consistent. Map also cannot be designed to preclude further development of neighboring properties. So all the property you see on the west side and south side could be further developed. In fact, there is an existing application for the property to the south to divide. However, the design of the applicant's map does not preclude further division of those properties. Therefore, they're consistent with this criteria requirement. Property to the east could actually become 4 lots. Again, however, the design of the applicant's division doesn't preclude them from subdividing that property into 4 lots because they have direct access onto Millersburg Drive. And property to the north has already been developed to its maximum potential. The project does not propose any streets at this time, nor do we feel any are required, because 3 homes are allowed to share a driveway, and as we pointed out before, this project is consistent with that requirement. City water and sewer are available in Millersburg Drive and have the capacity to accommodate this project. An easement will be required for the utilities to pass through parcel 1 to parcel 2, and that won't be on the private driveway. That's going to be to the rear of the existing home. That way it doesn't burden the property owner who has that shared driveway at this time. Though the site is not anticipated to present any drainage concerns, very similar to the last project that we discussed, we've added a condition of approval for the applicant to provide us a drainage study to show that prior to the map being recorded. Based on that, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the partition before you. I'm available if you have any questions, and I don't know whether or not my applicant is on the line. I believe that he is. Mr. Smith, are you on the line?
Unmuted. Yeah.
Is Mr. Smith there?
We don't know if Steve Smith's on the line or not, but we've unmuted everybody, so if you're out there, feel free to speak up.
Get it to whoever it is.
Well, if he decides to jump on at a future time here, we can accommodate any testimony that the applicant might have. We did speak with him. He's very aware that we're having a virtual hearing. In fact, he showed up out front and we told him that it's going to be virtual. And so he's aware for certain.
Okay. If he shows up before we get through, well, we'll let him speak then.
Hang on. We do have a raised hand from someone
Okay.
that may be the applicant, but you are unmuted and we are not hearing you. So you may have an issue with your microphone.
Once you give them the number to call in.
Yeah, it looks like Mr. Smith has joined us by video, but we can't hear you, Steve. And so we're going to have Janelle send you the telephone number you can call into if you like.
Well, I already sent it. So.
Oh, he already has it.
It's sent via text message to you, if that is you. So you might try calling in separately from a phone by entering the, I'll read the number anyway, just in case. 503-212-9900. Yeah, I'll just send it in the message.
Private message and see if that is him. Mr. Smith, if that is you, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat menu open up, and Janelle just is trying to message you there as well, if you could respond.
At any rate, Chair, if you wanted to move forward, and we'll just give him a few moments to chime in, we can see if there's anybody out there who has any desire to speak besides the applicant.
Okay. Well, if anyone has any questions of staff, now's the time to ask. And we'll see if Mr. Smith can get through. Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Vogler has raised his hand.
Yes, I have one. Matt, you had indicated the existing house south of these 2 lots that owns the shared driveway?
Correct.
You said potentially down the line he could subdivide further?
Oh, yes, quite.
At that point, are we going to make him put in a street instead of a shared driveway?
That is an excellent question. Let me go into a little bit more detail on that.
Okay.
Let me get to the right slide.
Because I remember you had said something about 3, so.
No, that's a great question. Let me back this up. You know, that's not even the best. This, what you see here on the slide in front of you, is showing the yellow area, and that's the property that is.
Hey, here we go.
Person to the south. Hey there. And right now we have a map that was approved next to. Here we go. This it's clear on this slide. You can see this new street coming in here. What is the name of the street? I don't recall.
Cantor, I think.
Cantor. This is Cantor Avenue coming in off of the subdivision here, west of the project site. And when they did the original partition here, we made it clear to the applicant, Mr. Helms, who lives in this property, as I understand it, so if this further subdivides, it would have to take access from this road, not from this, because this is too skinny to be a full road in the future. And we would have made that easement much wider, made it a 52-foot easement if we thought that was the only access that could come into the property. But when the original partition, 1806, I believe, was approved, we conditioned them to make it perfectly clear that future subdivision of the middle property would have to come off of Cantor Avenue.
Perfect.
And we even made it clear to Mr. Helms here on the center property that not only would he need to put a road in if that application moved forward, but he would have to show us how it would connect to the other property on the east side of his lot as well.
Perfect.
I'm here now, Janelle.
Great.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys now.
Well, go ahead. We're listening.
Okay, well, great. So this is Stephen Smith. And I'm not sure what you guys are needing from me.
And let me try, try now. No.
If you have your computer, if you can mute your, turn the volume down on your speakers.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better.
Okay. So so anyway, I'm not sure what you're needing from me. I'm trying to build another single family residence there. I do have one concern about the share of cost for the frontage. So just some background. I've done 2 others similar to this on Alexander. There was one a year ago and one I'm finishing up right now. Before I bought an acre, there was a mobile home on it that I removed and partitioned 2 lots off the back. And contrary to some of the opinions there, that developing these properties doesn't mean that I'm digging into a whole pile of money. The first one that I did at 3034, by the time I put the road improvements in, partitioned the lots, brought all the services in, those lots ended up costing me $100,000 a piece, which $100,000 a piece is quite a bit of money for considering you're developing the lot. If you go into a subdivision and you buy a lot, you may purchase one for $100,000, but to develop one, it doesn't leave any meat on the bone for anything but just a place for a builder like me to build a home. Up the street, I did the same thing. So the lot cost more money. Had to remove the mobile home, split the lot off. And again, those lots ended up costing me right at $100,000 a piece. So this one in particular it sold for 180, I think. And if you split it into 2 lots, that's 90,000 a piece. And then we have another $48,000 in this frontage fee, which sounds to me like it's more of a right now what it would cost to put that road in than what it cost when it was actually done. But it makes these lots, this rear lot, it's going to be a $140,000 lot, which is the last one I'll be doing in town, or more or less. I mean, because I can't afford to do stuff for fun and for free. I mean, I've got to feed my family. So that's about all I got.
Thank you. Matt, you want to address
Excuse me?
Thank you.
I can address, if Planning Commission is unfamiliar with what the applicant is talking about on the connection fees, I can explain that if you would like. Okay, so what he's referring to is condition number 10 in the conditions of approval. It says connection charges for water, sewer, streets, stormwater are due prior to recordation of the final plat. Those charges were adopted by council within the last year. They're fairly new, and they are fees that are charged when development takes place on road frontage where someone else put in the infrastructure. In this case, for the most part, the city put in this infrastructure. So their intent is to reimburse the original entity who paid those costs that allows development of this property. And we can definitely provide more information if Planning Commission is interested in understanding more about that. But those fees were adopted by council, and so staff doesn't have the ability, and I don't believe Planning Commission would either, to waive the fees or take that condition off, because even if it wasn't a condition of approval in your approval, they would still apply. Correct.
Okay.
I don't know where that number came from. It just seems to me that it's an astronomical number. I spoke with Kenny from Mid Valley, and he said that the city had asked him what half road and what full road improvements would cost, and they were at half to 2/3 of what the actual fee was that you guys have adopted. All I'm saying is that there was no way that I could split this lot into 3 ways and be able to recoup the cost of the lot and these other fees with the sale of a home. So like I said, this will be the last one that you'll see me do. I mean, I just can't do these. There's just not enough meat on the bone. So because I'm a developer, it doesn't mean that I'm cutting a fat hog out here. All of these infrastructure costs and all these costs are very, very expensive. And I would hope that the people on this, you crew of people would at least do the background and know actually what these costs are and what it costs and run the numbers on what a house would cost to build on a developed lot after the improvements without just throwing stones at it and saying that this person's making a lot of money or that person's making a lot of money. I listened to all the rhetoric on the prior one, and honestly, there's a lot to get those. I looked at purchasing that piece of property and developing it. There is a lot to get that property to a developable state. And, these things were brought up about the wetlands, about water runoff, about water retention, about road. I mean, you start adding up all those costs, and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to build in Millersburg. So if your council wants to move ahead and develop all these little outlying and pockets all over town, you're going to have to make it to where that a person could make a reasonable living at doing it, because the way it's going now with this new law, you're going to see less and less of it, if any of it.
Well, we got nothing to do with that.
So I'm off my soapbox now. But I'm honestly, this is the last one I'll do.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Smith.
Pardon me?
I say, I'm the chair. Let me ask you a question.
Yes. Sure.
You have a packet on this petition. Are you agreeable with the conditions that staff has imposed on this before we make a motion?
No, I don't have a packet on this. I was thinking I was going to come in there and sit in and I was going to open it up and look at it, but I hadn't received an email. I know that I'd just gotten back. I do not have the packet.
Well,
could you post it again like you did on the last one?
Janelle,
Pardon me?
Let staff answer you there. Janelle?
I'm sorry, we didn't quite catch all of that, but we can say the packet was mailed to the applicant, although it sounds like he wasn't in town to pick it up.
Yeah, I had been attending.
It has been posted to the website, and we certainly could email it to him as well to take a look at. But it was made available. Unfortunately, it just because he was out of town. Yeah.
I'm looking through a bag of mail here. I'm not seeing it here either. So. I don't know if I go into my emails. I didn't see it in email though.
Well,
it's not normally emailed.
Like I said, my biggest concern about the whole thing is this share of costs for the road. It's $48,000. It's a huge amount of money to split this lot up. And I was on the fence even if I should just split it off or just try and include it with the house that's in front and let somebody else kick the can down the road, so to speak. Let somebody else deal with this. But this is something it's just going to be there. Yeah, I don't know. I can't get into my emails unless I leave the meeting.
Okay, stand by a minute. Forrest?
Yes.
I see that we have maybe three options. The applicant could probably withdraw his motion or his application, or we can vote to approve it, or we can vote to deny it. What would you suggest?
Well,
You could.
That's right. Just what Matt was going to say. I don't want to make a suggestion other than a fourth option would be, if you wanted, is you can ask for a continuance of this matter for one more month as well.
I really don't care to. I really care to just have you guys go ahead and vote on it. I mean, if I've got to pay this fee is part of it, part of the mechanism anyway. It's not like that's going to change in 30 days. So I just assume you go ahead and vote on it, and we keep moving ahead here.
Okay. Well, I'm going to close the public meeting, and then we'll go for deliberation then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Commissioners, it's up to you now to make a choice. And if you'd like to make a motion.
Well, hang on. We didn't open the floor up to the public yet.
Oh,
Chair.
I got a question, so.
I missed that one, didn't I? Okay. What is it, Steve?
I've got a question for the applicant.
Okay.
Is he still there?
I am.
Oh, you're still there. Okay. For this piece of property to connect sewer and water, are you going to have to cut Millersburg into Millersburg Drive?
No, everything's stubbed into it. That was part of the consideration when I purchased it. We've got everything at the street. I've already spoke with Janelle about that prior to. No, we don't have to. It has water too.
Okay, since you brought it up earlier, I want to bring up one to you on your Alexandra project from a year ago. Yeah. The street cut that you did there, is unacceptable. It's sunk 2 inches. And every time I go by, I get thump as I'm driving by. That's unacceptable to me. That be redone.
So the city is doing those now. The city of Albany has taken those over, and they're doing all of that.
Yes and no. What was done in the past.
Yeah, that's
not how it's being done now.
I mean, you should have some kind of liability for that patch for a certain amount of time.
Nothing's ever been brought up to me about it, so I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I know the city is doing these now, and if there's anything that needs to be repaired on it, then there's obviously we would take care of it. So I haven't nothing's come down to pike me about this. I am not. I live right here. I live right here in town.
Okay, well, drive up Alexander about 35 and see how you like that.
If the city has an issue with something wrong in the street, then a complaint needs to be made to me that I can go ahead and address it. But I can't just, I mean, you can't, ambush me with something like this in the middle of the meeting with it. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, just to chime in, that it's not pertinent to the application that's before us today, and so it's not really something that should be discussed during the hearing for this item.
That's something you brought up, this Alexander property.
Let's let go of it. Do we have any more any more comments? Any more public input? Staff?
We're not seeing any hands raised from our video folks. Let us unmute the telephone people, and if anybody on the telephone would like to make a public comment, please feel free to speak up and we'll get you in here. All right, we're not seeing any hands and nobody's chiming in, so I think it's fair to close the public hearing and deliberate amongst yourselves.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I got ahead of myself there. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and now we can deliberate among ourselves. And the applicant says that he's ready for us to vote on this, so what is your pleasure? You got questions?
We do have a number of hands raised from planning commissioners.
Okay.
Connie and Steve both have hands raised right now.
Steve took us down.
Oh, Steve took us down. We only have a hand raised from Connie.
So I just have one question, and this really doesn't pertain to this, but it kind of does because you brought it up. So you're saying that the property on the south could subdivide and it would take access off of Cantor.
Correct.
So right now what you're saying is that shared driveway is owned by the property to the south, and those two properties would access off of that. So let me ask this then. If that property to the south does subdivide and go off of Cantor, who then owns that shared driveway?
I'm very impressed with that question. I have to be honest. This is something that Janelle and I talked for quite a while about, because we were worried that driveway could potentially become a no man's land,
right,
and could be a problem. However, Janelle and I arrived at the fact that it wasn't really within the purview of the city to require the applicant, Mr. Smith, to work with Steve Helms in order to do lot line adjustments to change that, or to incorporate that private driveway into the property here. The applicant could widen his proposed subdivision to go over that driveway with Steve Helms' consent, and it could be part of the project. But after a lot of discussion, Connie and I, Janelle and I realized that that was well beyond the city's ability to ask that. We even thought about trying to contact both of those property owners and suggest to them that they do that in the future, because it would make a lot more sense. But either way, acting on the application as it is certainly doesn't preclude those two property owners from getting together in the future and doing a lot line adjustment to eliminate that driveway going to the property to the south, Mr. Helms' property, and having it be part of the two lots that we're discussing today, two of the two parcels that we're discussing today.
It's already the legal access for the properties we're talking about dividing based on the easement that was established in the prior partition. So there isn't a risk that they don't have the right to use it. That's already established.
Correct.
So can I ask this question then, and this is just for future for me, is that if the guy on the south ever comes in and says, I want to develop, can we then say to him, you need to deed that property back, or do we have the right to do that?
We do not. And
Okay.
Forrest can elaborate on that if you would rather, but we do not have the right to require the property owners to change the boundaries of the applications that they submit to us. You can certainly deny it based on the fact that you feel it doesn't meet one of the criteria, and in this case, access. But remember, we do have an application on file for Mr. Helms' property to the south. And so that's something that we would be dealing with that specific application when it came through.
I was just wondering if when we get to his application, if we're going to have the ability to handle that. Because what we're looking at today doesn't have any impact on that, but I'm just looking at future.
Correct.
Because,
sure.
Yeah. So anyway.
No, and it's a great point. And like I said, I compliment you on the comment because we talked about it for a long time too. So good catch. In the end, I think there's nothing we could really require of either property owner at this juncture to address that in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
It'll
else?
be a self-correcting problem because eventually whoever owns Steve Helm's property is going to realize they're paying taxes on that driveway and they're going to want to offload that to the people who are actually using it. But again, that's beyond the purview of our discussion here this evening.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
Mr. Chair, because it's silent, I'd like to make a comment. This is Forestry. There was a comment made by Commissioner Vogler regarding some property that was not being considered this evening. And I'd ask that and make it a record that you folks will not consider that comment or the ensuing discussion regarding that unrelated property in your voting this evening, please. Can you all agree to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So let me know if anybody cannot agree to do that, please. It's not. Okay, so I'm just assuming everybody will disregard any of those comments because again, that was really outside the scope of this hearing. Thank you. I wanted the record to reflect that.
Thank you, Forrest. Does everybody agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess at this point, I would entertain the motion.
Yep. Oh, went too far. There you go. There you go.
Somebody care to make a motion to approve or disapprove?
I'll make a motion.
And what is your motion?
Based on the findings of fact and the conditions of approval, the proposed project satisfies the applicable criteria and staff recommends the Planning Commission approve petition application number PA 20-03 pursuant to the conditions of approval listed below.
Okay, we have a motion. Could I have a second?
I'll second that.
And we have a second. Any more discussion before I ask for a vote? Okay, will you cast your vote like we did the rest of them? Vote yes on green and no on red. Jake, will you take a tally?
I have all 6 in favor.
Okay.
I texted him how to do it.
Motion passes. In conclusion, we'd like to thank all those who have testified tonight. Your comments have been very helpful. If you'd like to appeal this to the City Council, you must file an appeal with the staff within 15 days. Is there anything else on the agenda, Matt?
No, sir.
Anybody?
I don't believe so.
Janelle, anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Chair, I would. So we just want it to be clear that the hearing on the first matter is continued. The record will remain open, and there will be that meeting or that hearing is continued to May 19th at 6 p.m.
Just the number.
Yeah, the number is, I'm looking for that. Let me see. It looks like, is that PA 20-01 regarding the Crook Street South land partition.
And what was that date again?
May 19th, 2020 at 6 p.m.
Okay, let's go on record that the PA 2001 Cooks Creek will be continued till next month's meeting. It is May the 19th.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood. It is not, I think you said it was 2001, and that's not what I believe it is. It's oh, did you say PA? Okay, I'm sorry, you did say it correctly. PA 2001. Thank you.
Okay. You're right, PA 2001, okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I think it went rather well.
Hey, Jimmy.
Thanks for your patience with me. This is the first time I've done this, and it's the first time everybody's done it, but I think we did well.
I think we did good.
Yeah.
Hey, Jimmy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where are we at with the land use code? I know that we were redoing some stuff, and then I'm not sure where we're at, I guess. Can we have an update?
Sure, Chair. Would you like me to give an update?
Would you please do that? Yes.
You bet, you bet. We did get through all of our workshops. So what we're doing right now is we being the staff here, we're going through the code to make sure that all the changes that were requested were made in the actual text. And then we're going through the whole formatting of the code. We're making sure that all of the numbering system is consistent, all the internal references are consistent with each other. We put that in front of a third set of eyes to make sure that we're not all crazy and missing something. And right now we're going through all that formatting to clean that all up. Once that's done, we're going to get an actual hearing date scheduled with everybody and make sure that it works for everyone. And then we'll bring you forward a full staff report. And this will be an actual land use hearing for the code change, for the comprehensive plan update, and anything else that needs to go along with that at the time. We don't have a date yet for that. We're going to try and make sure all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted before we get an actual date down. But we're certainly getting a lot closer.
Is that
and we would like, if possible, to have it where we can have an actual hearing. We're hopeful face-to-face versus trying to do that virtually. But we'll have to see based on what it looks like when we may see that reopening. That could be 1st of June, maybe before that could happen. So we'll have to kind of evaluate and see where we're at as we continue to get everything done. It's been slowed down a little bit because we've had a lot of additional stuff thrown on our plate with COVID. So please be patient with us with that regard, but we are working on it and trying to get that accomplished with the number of other things such as virtual meetings and stuff that have got added to our plates here in the last few months.
But next time you see it, it'll be for an actual vote, and your vote will be for a recommendation to the city council, and then there will be a whole nother round at the city council as well.
So it'll be 2 separate meetings then, or more.
Yes, but I don't want to insinuate that you only get one meeting to discuss the final version. If you need a couple of meetings to work through it, you can certainly continue it and discuss parts of it at one hearing and then continue it to another night. We're not going to limit you to just one hearing for the final thing, but it will be the real hearing, is all I was trying to say.
Okay, so the council and the commission will be separate meetings then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else want to add any comments or anything? Well, I'm going to adjourn the meeting then, and you can click out down below. It says leave meeting. You can click on that and we're through.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.